This is a presentation on brain and cognitive development in education. Our deep thinking question is, how might teachers apply their understanding and knowledge of working and long-term memory to develop instructional approaches to aid the ways in which our students learn?
To start, we wanted to outline what working memory is. We have a couple of quick definitions to start off with. The first is psychologists use the term working memory to describe the ability we have to hold in mind and mentally manipulate material over short periods of time. The second one is working memory is a small amount of information that can be held in mind and used in the execution of cognitive tasks, in contrast with long-term memory, which is the vast amount of information saved over one's life. Working memory can be divided up into four main components. The first part is the central executive, which supervises attention, makes plans, and decides what information to retrieve and how to allocate resources. The second is phonological loop, a speech and sound related system for holding and rehearsing or refreshing words and sound in short-term memory. The third part is the visuospatial sketchpad, a holding system for visual and spatial information. The fourth is the episodic buffer, which is the process that brings together and integrates information from the phonological loop, the visuospatial pad, and the long-term memory under the supervision of the central executive. It is important to note that working memory is known to be related to academic achievement and solving complex problems. However, thinking or critical thinking are factors of working memory. Some people have more efficient working memories than others, as well as rates of development.
What is long-term memory? Long-term memory is simply a large store of knowledge and record of past events. Where working memory capacity is limited, the long-term memory is not. We use long-term memory for the practical aspects of our daily lives. For example, when remembering a phone number, you are using long-term memory. Information can remain in our long-term memories permanently, but certain aspects will be easier to access. Easier accessible information may have been highly rehearsed or repeated, and so it stands out more in one's long-term memory. Overall, it takes time and effort to store memories and ideas in the long-term memory.
So why is it important for elementary school teachers to understand the principles of working and long-term memory? It's important for them to understand these principles so they may be able to better assist any students and identify any incoming students who may have developmental deficits with these types of memory or who need more time to reach their grade level in terms of development. There are ways that we can identify students with these working memory issues. The student has not been progressing well in class, the student cannot follow orders, or the student is easily distracted. Some ways to help these students are to monitor them and support them, and to reduce the workload and the memory load. When it comes to long-term memory, students in the higher grades of elementary school have better functioning LTMs. Teachers can expect that students in the lower grades, for example grades 1 to 4, will require extra assistance or may require more of a focus on working memory at their stage of development. A method that these teachers can use is rote recall. The repetition can ensure that students are referencing information more often, and this can help file the information away, further developing their long-term memory. Some things that these teachers have to keep in mind are social factors of the classroom. These can be the behavior of how the behavior of the students, no matter how young, can be affected by their peers. If one of their close friends wants to play a game or is showing little to no interest in an activity, there's a chance that the student you are trying to assist may follow their lead, making it difficult for you to work with the student on their memory. An emotional factor. There is a possibility of the student becoming emotionally frustrated when they are unable to properly remember information. This in turn may make them more reluctant to continue working on a task. And a participatory factor is that if a student is uninterested in a task whatsoever, they may be less willing to participate in it. If you are unable to keep the student engaged or they are not willing to give the task a try, your chances of helping them with the task or having them complete the task decrease.
It is also important that middle school teachers understand the principles of working and long-term memory as well. This research demonstrates the understanding of working memory as applied to students in upper and elementary and middle school. The first study explains working memory as applied to students in science classes. It was determined that there is a difference between students with high and low working memory capacity. Additional resources demonstrated that there is a link between energy levels and memory recall as well. The theory is that energizing or engaging activities aid in the moving of content from working to long-term memory. Lastly, it is important to note that working memory only stores a few units of information at a time. This causes a disconnect between text-based problems and the ability for students to recall information. Here's a summary of the topics discussed and how they can contribute to learning success.
Working in long-term memory applied to the upper grades. So it is clearly shown that students progress at different rates. Even at high school, students are still at different levels of their cognitive development. Working memory contains a capacity limit. Each individual's working memory is different and develops at different rates. A student's working memory will be more developed in high school than it is in middle school. However, students will be at various levels of development. Students' working memories will continue to develop all throughout their high school careers. So as a teacher, it is key to acknowledge that your students will be at different levels of cognitive development. But as students grow older, they are not constrained to as many working memory limitations as they were when they were younger learners. Teachers want to ensure that they give their students levels of appropriate reading material so that they are able to make sense of their readings. Tasks that are too complex can hinder our working memory and cause information to be lost. So when we look at working memory and writing, high school students have developed working memory and can be seen as older and more skilled writers. At the high school level, students who have a more developed working memory are able to write in critical and more organized ways. English and social studies classes highly revolve around being able to think critically, so teachers can develop many writing activities that address critical thinking skills. However, not all high school students may be quite free from working memory limitations. Those who are weaker writers may not be as far advanced in their working memory progression. It is crucial for a teacher to understand the class's writing ability as a whole. Those who are weaker writers may need to engage in alternative forms of generating knowledge in order for them to successfully engage in the writing process. And as we look at long-term memory, students organize and gather knowledge into their long-term memories. Teachers can use various strategies. These strategies can be used and adapted across multiple grade levels. To help their high school students successfully access information in long-term memories, teachers can do such things as teach their students to be active readers, provide retrieval practice, allow time for review, and teach students how to use visual representations. These strategies can enable and help students simply to retrieve learning material from their long-term memories.
In this last section, we want to look at some of the links to key essays and a little bit of summary along with that. So all students learn, and albeit at different rates and in different ways, and there are many approaches to teaching and learning. We wanted to address the idea here that remind you that working memory develops at different rates in different students and has a very large impact on how students learn. As teachers, we should be aware of the differences in working memory amongst our students and plan accordingly for that. Teachers will know the functions of traditional and electronic teaching / learning technologies, and they know how to use it to engage students in using these technologies to present or deliver content. The idea here is that some students are going to respond well to certain types of technology and others may not, but as teachers we should be able to adapt to that and know if the technology is helping our students or hindering them. Teachers will know the importance of short, medium, and long-term range planning. They will also understand the need to vary their plans to accommodate individuals and groups of students. Here, teachers should be planning according to the needs of their students. They should be keeping in mind that there will be differences in their students, and they should plan according to that. Well, many are quick to point out how this could be used for students who are behind, and it is also important for students who are developmentally ahead so that they are properly being engaged. Because if they're not being engaged, even if they are a very smart kid, they might not be learning anyways if they're not engaged. Teachers will understand the contextual variables affecting teaching and learning. Knowing the age of your students is obviously important because knowing the students that you're working with age-wise and knowing where they're at developmentally based on that age is going to be important. And how you plan and knowing whether or not your planning is feasible given the age of your students. And lastly, teachers will know the purpose of assessment and how to best use the results from assessment to the benefit of their students. Teachers should be evaluating whether or not their assessment is asking too much of their students, whether it is cognitively too much, or whether or not it's, and then take that information and adjust their planning and their assessment accordingly.
Here we have listed a couple additional resources that can assist teachers with understanding the ideas behind working in long-term memory. They can apply strategies from these sources to create a more successful learning environment. The first one is a document about cognitive deficits that outline deficits in long-term memory, short-term memory, and processing speed, and suggests tests to measure these abilities and deficits. After that is a document with links to various activities and strategies to help develop memory.
So that's it. You can find the references at the bottom of each webpage and on the summary. And remember, you can't look at a glass half full or half empty if it's overflowing.